The galaxy had always been full of stories. Some were true, some were lies, and some were whispered so quietly that no one dared to believe them. Among these tales, one name stood above all others: humans. They were supposed to be gone, extinct, or hiding somewhere far from the known stars. Yet the stories persisted. Humans were clever, unpredictable, and dangerous beyond imagination. They were said to have warships that could appear out of nowhere and destroy fleets without warning. Most civilizations laughed at such tales. Humans were just legends, myths told to scare children or to make young soldiers respect the power of the past. Admiral Cathar of the Zephyr Collective had spent decades listening to these stories. He had faced pirate fleets, rival empires, and even cosmic storms that could tear entire star systems apart. He had seen horrors no one could imagine. Yet no matter how many battles he had fought, there was a quiet part of him that feared the unknown, especially the unknown called humans. It started with whispers in the communications channels, minor signals that no one could trace, reports from scouts in the Orion void, deep in uncharted space. At first, Cathar ignored them. "Impossible," he muttered. "Humans are extinct. They do not exist." But the reports became more frequent, more detailed. Sensors picked up massive warships moving at speeds beyond any known technology. And the strange thing was, they weren't attacking yet. They were coming. Slowly, deliberately, like hunters approaching their prey. On Station Epsilon, Lieutenant Mara watched the radar with wide eyes. She had always admired the humans from stories, from old records of legendary battles where humanity supposedly changed the course of history. But now she saw something that made her stomach twist. "Admiral, something is out there," she said, her voice trembling. "It's enormous. Hundreds of ships, moving together like a single organism. And they're coming here." Cathar's jaw tightened. He had trained his whole life to face threats, yet this was different. "Impossible," he whispered. "Legends cannot move fleets. Legends cannot breathe fire across the void." But the readings didn't lie. Something massive, something alive was coming, and it carried the human insignia, simple and bold, glowing on each hull. Across the galaxy, word spread fast. Traders in the Orion markets paused their deals, soldiers stopped marching, and civilians stared at the skies. No one could fully explain it. Humans were supposed to be extinct, yet here they were, appearing as if they had never left, bringing with them the promise of destruction or salvation. No one could tell which. Mara's eyes filled with tears as she whispered to herself, "They're real. They're real." Around her, other officers muttered the same, disbelief and fear mixing together. But fear was not the only feeling. There was awe, excitement, and a strange kind of hope. If humans had returned, maybe the stories of old were true. Maybe there were beings in the galaxy brave and strong enough to challenge anything. Cathar straightened in his chair, his mind racing. He knew that the next moments would decide the fate of the Zephyr Collective. He had faced invaders before, but never like this. Humans were more than just powerful. They were unpredictable, clever, and terrifyingly confident. And the fact that no one knew what they would do next made them even more dangerous. As the first signals of the approaching fleet shimmered on the sensors, the Admiral realized the truth. Humans were no longer legends. They were here. And the galaxy would soon learn that the stories had been true all along. The name human would strike fear and awe into every species, in every corner of the stars. And so, with his fleet preparing for something that no training could have fully prepared them for, Cathar whispered to himself, "Legends are alive, and they are coming for us." The stars, silent for so long, seemed to hold their breath. The void of space suddenly felt smaller, tighter, and more alive. The Zephyr fleet, proud and disciplined, waited for the supposed legendary humans to arrive. Their sensors had been tracking strange movements for hours, but nothing had prepared them for the sight that finally appeared beyond the Orion Nebula. Hundreds of massive, sleek warships emerged from the darkness. Their hulls glimmered with sharp edges, and the Earth insignia glowed on every ship. The humans were real. They were here. Lieutenant Mara felt her chest tighten. Her fingers hovered over the control panel, shaking slightly. "Admiral, they're real," she whispered. "They're not stories. They're massive." Her voice trembled with a mix of fear and awe. Around her, the officers shared her reaction. Some gasped. Others simply stared at the displays, unable to move. Admiral Cathar did not speak at first. He had seen thousands of fleets, countless threats, but nothing like this. The human ships moved with precision that was almost eerie. They didn't scatter or hesitate. They didn't send messages or warnings. They just appeared, cutting through space with unimaginable speed like a tide of metal and fire. Then, without warning, the humans struck. Lasers and missiles fired in perfect synchronization, hitting Zephyr cruisers with deadly accuracy. Shields flared and broke. Explosions bloomed across the void. Entire squads of Zephyr soldiers, trained for years, were obliterated within moments. The horror was absolute. "Shields are failing. They're too fast," one officer shouted. Mara gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles white. "How is this possible? No fleet can move like this." Cathar's eyes narrowed. "They are not attacking recklessly," he said slowly. "They are precise. They are calculating. Every strike has a purpose. They are humans." It became clear that this was not just a battle of firepower. The humans seemed to anticipate every Zephyr move, dodging missiles with almost playful agility and striking where it would hurt the most. Ships that thought themselves invincible were torn apart, sometimes without warning, sometimes after being outmaneuvered in ways no one had imagined. Mara's voice broke as she whispered to herself, "They're fearless. They're not afraid of anything." She watched as a human ship flew through a hailstorm of lasers, weaving like a bird through trees, then fired back, destroying 2 enemy destroyers in a single strike. It was terrifying, beautiful, and unbelievable all at once. The Zephyr fleet attempted to regroup, forming defensive lines and counterattacks. But every move the humans made seemed to anticipate theirs. They were not just fighting, they were teaching, showing what skill, courage, and determination could accomplish. Every ship that fell against them seemed to strengthen the humans' resolve rather than weaken it. Even from the observation deck of the flagship, Cathar felt something strange stirring inside him. Fear, yes, but also awe. These were legends, alive and burning brighter than any story had ever told. They were humans, the creatures of myth, returning not to hide, but to remind the galaxy that no one could ever predict them, and no one could match their will. Mara whispered again, almost reverently, They're not monsters. They're something greater. They're warriors, and something more, something human." As the first wave of battle settled and the smoke of shattered ships drifted through space, the Zephyr fleet realized the terrifying truth. They had not faced humans. They had faced a force that no strategy, no training, no legend could fully prepare them for. Humans were not just strong. Humans were alive, dangerous, and magnificent in a way the galaxy had never known. And in the distance, the glowing insignias of Earth shone like beacons, silent but commanding. The humans had arrived. The galaxy would never forget this day. The aftermath of the first strike left the Zephyr fleet reeling. Ships drifted in ruins. Alarms blared across every bridge, and soldiers moved like ghosts, shaken and unsure. Admiral Cathar stood on the observation deck of his flagship, staring at the glowing horizon where the humans had retreated. There, ships hovered calmly, almost tauntingly at the edge of the battle. He had never seen anything like it. "Admiral," Lieutenant Mara said, her voice shaking, "they didn't destroy everything. They spared some of our fleet. Why?" Cathar's gaze didn't waver. "I don't know. They are precise, deliberate. This is not chaos. This is calculated." His hands clenched. "They are not here to annihilate us. They are here to test, to challenge, but for what purpose? I cannot guess. On the battlefield, Captain Elena of the Horizon's Edge watched the human warships from her monitor. She had fought countless enemies, but never had she seen warriors so confident, so fearless, and yet so purposeful. The humans moved like a single mind, each ship anticipating the next strike, predicting enemy maneuvers. They did not just fight, they commanded the flow of battle. Jiro, Elena's lieutenant, looked troubled. Captain, why are they not attacking us directly? They could end this now. Elena shook her head. They are not reckless. They do not kill blindly. Humans, they have a different way of fighting. It is not just strength. They are teaching, testing, and perhaps giving us a chance to understand them. Across the fleet, soldiers whispered tales they had only heard in stories. The humans were living legends, and their reputation was real. Every movement inspired fear, yes, but also admiration. There was a strange beauty in the way they struck, in the courage with which they faced danger, in the way they seemed unafraid of impossible odds. On a distant Zephyr cruiser, Lieutenant Mara saw one human ship break through a blockade to save a civilian transport. Explosions lit the void, yet the humans remained calm, moving with precision. They care for life, she whispered, tears in her eyes. They are warriors, but they are heroes too. Cathar realized something he had never admitted to anyone. Humans were not only powerful, they were unpredictable in ways that logic could not explain. Their strength was not in technology alone. It was in their courage, their determination, their refusal to surrender to fear. Legends, yes, but alive, and that was far more dangerous than anything he had faced before. As night fell over the Galactic, human ships regrouped at the edge of Zephyr space. Messages were sent, but they contained no words, only tactical movements. Every fleet that tried to attack them was countered, not with reckless aggression, but with smart, precise maneuvers. The humans were teaching, reminding the galaxy that skill, courage, and intelligence could outmatch even overwhelming numbers. Mara turned to Cathar. They're human. They can't be destroyed like we thought. They're something more than us, stronger, wiser, alive. Her voice trembled with awe and fear. Cathar nodded slowly. I have trained for a lifetime, faced every enemy known to the galaxy, yet I feel powerless. Not against their weapons, but against their spirit. Humans are not just fighters, they are ideas made real, and ideas cannot be killed. For the first time in centuries, Cathar understood the truth of the stories he had dismissed. Legends were not only alive, they were teaching the galaxy a lesson. The lesson was clear. Strength without courage was useless, and power without purpose could be destroyed. Humans embodied both. And somewhere, in the quiet corners of the galaxy, humans waited, patient and precise. They were not finished. Not yet. The Zephyr fleet would have to adapt or fall, and the galaxy would soon discover what it truly meant to face a legend that lived, breathed, and fought like no other. The stars shimmered, silent witnesses to the rising tension. Fear mingled with awe, despair with hope, as the humans' presence reminded every being that legends were not just stories. They were real, dangerous, and unforgettable. The void of space was quiet again, but the tension remained. The Zephyr fleet had regrouped after the first exchanges, still trembling from the humans' arrival. Smoke and debris drifted slowly through the stars, reminders of the overwhelming power that had just passed. Soldiers whispered among themselves, some still too scared to speak above a murmur. Others stared in awe at the distant human warships, sleek and silent as they hovered at the edge of the system. Then, a small human vessel approached a neutral Zephyr station. Unlike the massive warships that had torn through enemy fleets, this ship was modest, battered yet strong. Alarms rang across the station. Soldiers raised weapons, unsure whether to prepare for an attack or surrender. The humans had arrived, unannounced in the middle of the chaos, and nobody knew their intention. The hatch opened. A single figure stepped out. Commander Rian, tall and calm, His uniform simple but commanding, faced the Zephyr soldiers without fear. His eyes held no malice, only clarity. "We are not here to destroy you," he said, his voice firm yet gentle. "We came to stop those who would harm you. You have been fighting enemies that could enslave your people. We are here to help." A murmur ran through the station. Some soldiers lowered their weapons, confused and skeptical. Others tensed, unsure whether this was a trap. Mara, standing beside Admiral Cathar, felt her chest tighten. Could this be true? Could the legends really be benevolent? Ryan didn't wait for permission. Through the station's observation windows, everyone saw the humans' warships act again. A fleet of marauders had entered the system, hoping to plunder and conquer. The humans moved like a living wave, fast and precise. One by one, enemy ships were disabled without unnecessary destruction. Explosions lit the dark void, yet the humans remained calm, in control, and purposeful. "They're saving us," Mara whispered, tears filling her eyes. "They're not just fighters. They care about life." Cathar's jaw tightened. He had faced countless battles, commanded fleets across the stars, yet he had never felt this combination of fear and awe. These humans were not only powerful, they had a purpose beyond war. They fought with honor, with morality, and with courage that seemed larger than the galaxy itself. Rian turned to the station leaders. "We will not fight you unless you choose to oppose us," he said. "But we will stand against anyone who threatens life and freedom. Join us or watch as we stop your enemies for you. The choice is yours." Elena, observing from her cruiser, understood the unspoken message. Humans did not rely on terror. They relied on principle, skill, and courage. Every movement, every decision was deliberate. They were showing that war could be fought with heart, not just weapons. Across the station, soldiers began to realize something they had not thought possible. Humans were not myths. They were not monsters. They were beings who could challenge the galaxy itself and still choose compassion over cruelty. Stories they had laughed at, stories of impossible human feats, were not exaggerations. They were real. Mara turned to Cathar, voice trembling. They're teaching us something, not just how to fight, but how to be brave, how to care, how to hope even in the darkest moments. Cathar finally admitted aloud what he had only felt deep inside. Humans are not just legends. They are alive, stronger than we imagined, yes, but also nobler. They remind us that strength is nothing without courage, and power is meaningless without purpose. The station, once tense and fearful, now buzzed with a strange energy. Soldiers and officers alike felt something stirring inside, a spark of hope, a hint that even in the vast, dangerous galaxy, there were beings who fought not for conquest, but for honor, for life, and for the future. And in the distance beyond the stars, the human warships gleamed silently, waiting, watching, ready. They were more than fighters. They were a lesson, a promise, and a legend walking among the living. The galaxy would remember this moment forever. The humans had arrived, and the stars would never look the same again. The Zephyr fleet gathered, in a tight formation, damaged ships limping alongside those still capable of fighting. Fear hung heavy in the air, and whispers of doubt filled every bridge. But humans were there, calm and precise, their warships gleaming under the distant stars. Their presence alone seemed to inspire the fleet, giving soldiers courage they hadn't felt in years. Admiral Cathar studied the humans' movements carefully. Every strike they made, every maneuver, seemed to follow a pattern that the Zephyr fleet had never seen before. It was not random. It was methodical, intelligent, and perfectly timed. Humans were teaching them without words, showing how to fight. Smarter, not harder. Captain Elena of the Horizon's Edge stood at her command console, watching as humans guided smaller Zephyr squadrons to flank enemy positions. "They're organizing us," she said in disbelief. "They're showing us where to strike and when to hold back. I've never seen anything like this." Lieutenant Giro shook his head. It's impossible. They move as if they are one mind, one body. How can an entire fleet act with such precision? Elena's voice was quiet but firm. Because they are human, and they are not afraid of impossible odds. That's what makes them legends. The battle began again. This time the Zephyr fleet moved differently. Soldiers held their lines, waited for the right moments, and struck only when humans signaled the opening. They had learned to trust the humans' instincts, to fight not recklessly, but with purpose. Slowly, the enemy fleet began to falter. Ships that had once struck fear into the Zephyr forces were destroyed or forced to retreat. Mara watched from the flagship, her eyes wide with wonder. They're leading us. They're giving us a chance. And it's working. We're winning because of them. Cathar's voice was barely audible as he muttered, Humans are not just fighters. They are teachers, strategists, and a force that turns fear into hope. Even the soldiers on the front lines felt the shift. They fought harder, moved smarter, and believed for the first time that they could survive. The humans weren't just winning battles. They were inspiring courage in everyone around them. Every maneuver, every strike, every calculated risk reminded the Zephyr fleet that victory was possible if they trusted themselves and their new allies. One human ship, sleek and fast, darted through enemy lines, drawing fire away from Zephyr, transports carrying civilians. Explosions lit the dark void, yet the ship emerged unscathed, its crew calm, almost smiling. Mara whispered, tears in her eyes. They fight for more than themselves. For life, for honor, for everyone. That is what makes them unstoppable. Cathar realized the truth he had feared and hoped for at the same time. The humans were more than warships. They were living ideals, embodiments of courage, strategy, and relentless determination. Legends had come alive, and their power was not just in their weapons, it was in their will, their heart, and their refusal to accept defeat. By the end of the battle, the enemy fleet was shattered, retreating in disarray. The Zephyr forces, battered and bruised, had survived against overwhelming odds. But it wasn't their skill alone that saved them. It was the humans, their guidance, their courage, and their presence that had turned despair into victory. Mara turned to Cathar, voice trembling with respect and awe. They're humans, and they're incredible. Legends are real, and they fight for what is right. Cathar nodded slowly, eyes still fixed on the distant stars where the human warships waited. They're reality, and they have reminded us what courage truly means. In the quiet aftermath, the Zephyr fleet felt a new energy coursing through its ranks. The humans had not only won the battle, they had changed the hearts of those who fought alongside them. Legends had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same. The battlefield was silent, except for the faint hum of distant stars and the smoke drifting from shattered warships. The Zephyr fleet, exhausted and battered, hovered among the debris of their enemies, their crews still trying to comprehend the magnitude of what had just occurred. But in the silence, a deeper lesson unfolded, one that went beyond strategy, beyond weapons, beyond fear. On the edge of the battlefield, a single human warship, the Aurora Flame, drew the attention of the remaining enemy fleet. Its hull was scorched, its shields flickering, but its movements were deliberate, confident, and unwavering. The ship had chosen to face overwhelming firepower alone, creating a shield for the Zephyr transports carrying civilians and wounded soldiers. Mara watched in disbelief. They're sacrificing themselves to save us, she whispered, tears streaking her cheeks. She gripped the console as the human ship danced through enemy lasers, dodging attacks with impossible precision, yet always staying between danger and the vulnerable fleet. Every move was a message. Courage was not absence of fear. It was the choice to act in spite of it. Admiral Cathar's hands tightened around the railing. He had faced death countless times, commanded fleets through the most desperate battles, yet he had never witnessed bravery like this. This is beyond legend, he muttered. This is humanity at its core, fearless, selfless, and true. On board the Aurora Flame, Commander Rian remained calm despite the chaos. Courage isn't the absence of fear. He broadcasted across the fleet's channels, his voice steady and resolute. It's acting even when fear is real. Protect life. Fight injustice. And never forget who you are. The message resonated through every Zephyr ship, stirring hearts that had once trembled in despair. The enemy faltered. They had faced many fleets before, but none that moved with such unity and purpose. The humans' bravery, their willingness to risk everything for others, unsettled them. Confusion replaced aggression, and soon, the enemy fleet began to retreat, ships scattering into the void. Victory had been achieved not merely through power but through the strength of heart and the clarity of purpose. Mara wiped her tears, staring at the stars where the human warships waited silently. They fight for more than victory, she whispered. They fight for life, for hope, for something greater than themselves. Cathar nodded slowly. He had underestimated humans for too long. Legends, he realized, were not just about strength. They were about the ideals that inspired others, the courage that sparked hope, and the moral fire that refused to be extinguished. Humans were alive, yes, but more than that, they were ideals walking among the living. The Zephyr fleet gathered around the remaining human warships, some battered, some smoking, but all still intact. Soldiers and officers alike felt a deep sense of respect, awe, and gratitude. They had been witnesses to something extraordinary. Humans had reminded them that war was not only about victory, but about protecting those who could not protect themselves. Elena turned to her crew. We fought alongside legends, she said softly. Not just warriors, but heroes. And they taught us what courage really is. Mara's voice was barely audible. We thought humans were myths, stories from the past, but they're real, and they've changed everything, forever. Cathar allowed himself a small smile, rare and genuine. Legends live, he said, and sometimes they show up when the galaxy needs them most. Far beyond the battlefield, the human warships glided through the stars, calm and proud, their crews ready for the next challenge. They had won battles, yes, but more importantly, they had reminded every being watching that courage, honor, and sacrifice were stronger than any weapon, faster than any fleet, and brighter than any star the galaxy would remember this day. The humans, once thought to be only stories, had shown their true power, not just in fire and steel, but in heart, in spirit, and in the unwavering determination to fight for what is right. And in that quiet, vast void, the truth became clear. Legends were not gone. They were alive, and they had arrived. The galaxy was quiet once more, but the echoes of battle lingered like a heartbeat through the stars. Ships, both Zephyr and human, glided through the void, damaged yet unbowed. Survivors whispered among themselves, telling stories that could scarcely be believed, tales of courage, precision, and an impossible strength that had come from humans. The legends were real. Admiral Cathar stood before the Council of Allied Species, his face weathered but firm. He had spent a lifetime commanding fleets, facing threats that had toppled entire civilizations. Yet standing there, looking at the representatives of every allied race, he felt awe like never before. Humans were no longer stories in dusty archives. They were reality, walking among the living, stronger and more inspiring than any myth could ever describe. We thought humans were myths, Cathar began, his voice steady, yet filled with emotion. We thought they were tales to frighten children, or reminders of a dangerous past. But today we have seen the truth. Humans are alive. They are not just warriors, they are ideals made flesh, a force that teaches us courage, hope, and the meaning of sacrifice. Across the council chamber, murmurs rippled. Many representatives had witnessed the humans in action firsthand. Others had only heard of their deeds secondhand, but now they knew it was real. Fear mixed with awe, and awe became respect. Stories that had once seemed impossible were now undeniable truth. Captain Elena of the Horizon's Edge stepped forward, her eyes shining. They fought with precision, yes, she said. But more than that, they fought with heart. Every strike, every maneuver, every act of courage reminded us what it means to be alive. To fight not just for power, but for honor, for life, for hope. Lieutenant Mara added, her voice trembling with pride. They saved lives. They risked everything. Not for glory, not for conquest, but to protect the innocent. And in doing so, they have shown every species in this galaxy what it truly means to be brave. Cathar nodded, feeling the weight of his words and the truth behind them. Legends are not just stories. Legends are alive. They breathe, they think, they act, and sometimes they return when the galaxy needs them most. Far beyond the council chambers, the human warships glided silently through space. Their crew, calm and resolute, prepared for whatever challenge awaited them next. They had won battles, yes, but their true victory was the inspiration they left behind, the courage they instilled in allies, the fear they awakened in enemies, and the belief they rekindled across the stars that no force could ever crush the spirit of life and determination. On board the Aurora Flame, Commander Rian looked out at the endless black of space. He thought of the billions of lives touched by their arrival, the lives saved, the fleets guided, the hope restored. Humanity had returned not as conquerors, but as legends reborn, showing that courage, honor, and determination could stand against any odds. Mara watched him from afar, awe and admiration in her eyes. They are everything the stories said, and more, she whispered. Humans are more than legends. They are proof that one species can change the galaxy with heart, will, and courage. Cathar allowed himself a rare smile. The galaxy has learned something today. Not just that humans exist, but that bravery is not measured by numbers or firepower, but by the choices we make. Humans have shown us that even in the darkest hours, hope can burn brighter than any star. The stars shimmered around them, silent, witnesses to what had been accomplished. The galaxy had faced legend and found it alive, real, and unforgettable. The humans, once thought to be stories, had returned to remind every being of a truth older than empires. Courage, honor, and sacrifice were stronger than fear, faster than fleets, and brighter than any weapon. And as the human warships disappeared, into the distance, their insignias glowing like beacons of hope, the galaxy understood one final, undeniable truth. Legends are not born. Legends live. And sometimes, they come back to save the world. For the first time in centuries, the word myth had a living face, a beating heart, and a fire that refused to be extinguished. The galaxy would never forget it. The end.